It is Pride Month, so I've accumulated a stack of 8 books that I would highly recommend if you're looking to prioritize queer authors and queer stories this month to celebrate our LGBTQI plus brothers and sisters. While I'm not part of that community myself, I'm a staunch ally, which means that I intentionally diversify my reading to include queer authors on any side of that spectrum. I have sapphic gothic horror, I have absolutely unhinged diabolical characters, and also sweet sports romances. So let's go through the stack and let me help you build your June TBR. I feel like it cannot truly be a thorough Pride Month bookmark video if you're not recommending any books by C.G. Drews. C.G. Drews is a queer, non-binary author, and I will read anything they write. The book I particularly would like to recommend is Hazelthorne. This is their YA horror debut. However, they also have a fantastic adult horror debut called You Did Nothing Wrong, and while that highlights a straight couple, I would highly recommend it. It's one of the creepiest books I've read this year. Hazelthorne is about our two main characters, Evander and Laurie. Evander has been taken in and taken care of by a reclusive billionaire in this really creepy manor with a very alive and thorny garden, and because Evander is autistic, he has these tantrums and meltdowns often enough where they seem to just medicate him to shut him up and lock him in his room. He can never leave, he can never go to the gardens, and he can never be alone with a boy named Laurie, who is a boy who tried to kill him 7 years ago and a boy he's also secretly obsessed with. But when this billionaire guardian is murdered, it's up to Evander and Laurie to reluctantly team up and figure out what happened. Dark secrets unravel, there's a lot of fungal plant horror, all the while Laurie and Evander are slowly realizing their feelings for each other while trying to figure out this murder mystery and also actively fight this estate in this vicious garden known as Hazelthorne. The autistic representation in this book is stellar, as C.G. Drews is autistic themselves, and they include autism representation in almost every book they write, and it's just done so well every single time. I also sometimes struggle with YA books, but with Hazelthorne, I was completely invested. I did not need no spice or smut. The reluctant allies to lovers in this book is just so delicious, and the ending is so bittersweet. I think if you're looking for an intro into horror with something that's a little more tame, just as creepy and crawly with all of the plant horror, but not super diabolical or disturbing, and looking for a sweeter romance, I definitely recommend Hazelthorne. I then have a sports romance to recommend for you, and that is Set Point by Meg Jones. This is one of my recent reads, and I really enjoyed this. Meg Jones is a Scottish bisexual author, and while I've not read any of their other romance books, I picked this up specifically because I saw it was queer, and I absolutely did not regret it. Inez and Chloe, the main couple, live rent-free in my head ever since I finished this book. This is a tennis romance, so we have Inez Costa, who is Spanish, and she is kind of fading from the limelight. She had an injury that kind of took her out of the game, and more specifically, she started going against this American tennis player named Chloe, who is known for being very hot-headed on the court, and Inez has lost her a few times now and has kind of lost her confidence. And then Inez goes on a weekend away with her friends, only to realize they invited Chloe and her boyfriend. So through some forced proximity, Inez and Chloe are sort of forced to have it out, not only their current conflict, but their secret past. And along the way, they decide to be business partners with Inez, training Chloe to be a better tennis player. Between practice drills and tour stops, the lines start to blur between rivals to friends to lovers. And yeah, I just absolutely adored this book. It's very sweet, it's very wholesome, it's very predictable, but that's not always bad in a romance book. Like sometimes you just want to know what you're getting into, and Inez and Chloe are both complex, but also mature and able to talk things out. And I really loved the ending of this particular story, very full circle. And yeah, I think if you're looking for that traditional sports romance with a sapphic queer relationship, Set Point is the book for you. Next, I have a weird girl lit recommendation, and that is Big Swiss by Jen Began. This book is a little nutty, it's a little kooky, it's more character driven than plot driven, so some people have mixed opinions on it, but I actually really liked it. We follow Greta, who's an older middle-aged woman, and she decides to live with her friend Sabine in this old rustic Dutch house kind of in the countryside. And part I really love about this book is the atmosphere, because the way the authors are able to describe this unrenovated house and how it's uninsulated, it's full of bees, I just really felt like it was kind of a springy, summery atmosphere, so I think it's perfect for this upcoming summer as well. And Greta spends her day transcribing sex therapy sessions remotely until she gets infatuated with a new client that she's transcribing who calls herself Big Swiss, because she's kind of this repressed married woman, because Big Swiss chooses to remain unattached to her trauma while Greta is haunted by hers. One day Greta recognizes Big Swiss in town, and obviously this woman is not aware that Greta knows basically a ton of stuff about her personal life, and the two quickly become enmeshed, and Greta will do anything to keep the relationship going. These characters are outlandish, they're weird, they're not meant to be likable. And this book is sort of an examination of infidelity, mental health, as well as sexual stereotypes between not only queer and bisexual women, but older aged women as well. I really felt the environment and setting was really well fleshed out. And again, sometimes it's slower paced and it's very character driven. There's not a lot going on. You're kind of in Greta's inner monologue. But then there'll be these things that happen and the narrative kind of explodes. And I just was really fascinated by our characters. You're not meant to really root for them. You're not meant to really be on their side. Yet I couldn't help but be captivated and want to turn the page because I had to figure out what crazy thing they were going to do next. I also laughed out loud audibly multiple times in this book because the descriptions of genitalia and like sexual acts that Jen Began writes are honestly comical and relatable. And most of the time I was reading this with a smile on my face. So yes, I would definitely recommend this, especially if you're looking to start your weird girl lit journey. Big Swiss is a perfect book to start with. Next, let's talk about Muñeca by Cynthia Gomez. This is one of my most recent 5-star reads. Yes, I absolutely adored this book. It just came out, I think, on June 2nd. It's only 150 pages. It is a sapphic, witchy historical fiction, and I ate it up. It's set in 1968 Oakland, and you follow a woman named Natalia who practices witchcraft, and she decides to apply to be a caregiver for a woman named Violetta, who is sort of in this comatose, bedridden state, except she believes that this woman is only in this state because she's under a curse by her husband. And so her whole intentions with going to break this curse for Violetta is to get some money from her, so that way when she does break her spell, hopefully Violetta will be grateful enough to give her some compensation, and Natty can kind of move on with her life. However, as they both sort of work towards breaking the spell, because Violetta can only communicate using her eyes, they slowly start to grow feelings for each other. And this book gets a little spicy, which I was not anticipating, but honestly loved. And this book has a very vengeful, bloody, happily ever after, which was just the cherry on top. Usually I'm not a huge historical fiction person, but the way that Cynthia Gomez was able to interweave these narratives, a part of it was the overtaking of Mexican California by colonizers, and the other part was kind of exploring these underground queer spaces in the 1960s. It wasn't too heavy-handed, but it was just enough where I learned something, which I thought was my type of pacing in a historical fiction. And the sapphic romance in this is so wholesome. And overall, there's this really a story about liberation and finding empowerment and the awakening of your own sexuality and finding where your safe space is going to be in the world. Like I said, this was a 5 out of 5 stars. It's short, it's sweet, it's punchy, it's impactful. Go pick it up and read it. This is one of my favorite reads of the year so far. I have another contemporary romance for you, but this involves a time loop, time travel element, and that is The House of Now and Then by Edward Underhill. Edward Underhill is a trans author, and this is featuring a trans man named Harlow who just broke up with his boyfriend and is trying to escape the stuffiness of Boston. So he decides to go to Cape Cod for the summer, where he rents a cabin from another trans woman. But when he walks into this cabin in the Cape, he comes face to face with 3 people that he's had conflict with in his life: a professor that discouraged him from his dreams, his father who he has a tense relationship with, and his most recent ex-boyfriend. And they're all in these different places in this house, like the professor's in the dining room, the dad's in the kitchen, and his ex-boyfriend's in the bathroom. And they keep sort of repeating the same lines over and over again, like they don't realize the current timeline they're in. So throughout the book, our main character Harlow is kind of forced to come face to face with these issues he's been running from and these people he's not been able to really address properly. There's also a slow burn romance with the woman he's running the cabins from nephew. This nephew has baggage of his own. Him and Harlow have this sort of slow burn push to pull, figuring out each other's trauma and coming together, and it's really so sweet. I will say this book is on like the lower rating spectrum of some of the books I have in here, only because I feel like the time loop element could have been a little more effective. I feel like Harlow didn't really confront himself when he had these conversations with these people. Rather, he kind of talks about his problems with these people, and I feel like there was a little bit of lack of self-reflection. However, if you're into time loopy romances and you're looking for that trans representation and a very wholesome and multi-layered queer relationship, I still think this can be a great book for you. I'm going to go off a similar note of not the highest rated book I have on this list, but still one I would recommend to people, and that is Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This was actually my Let's Get Literate Fable book club's pick for the month of June because our theme for June was Pride Month. If you want to join us on Fable, it's completely online. It's very low commitment. I have the link in this description here. The whole point of my club is to promote literacy and to read diversely amongst genres and authors. I feel like Hungerstone's this quote classic. It's a Carmilla retelling. I've never read the classic book Carmilla, but you don't really need to for this book. This book is a dark, gothic, sapphic literary horror. I feel like the horror elements are pretty subdued, but there's a lot of talks about blood and things getting bloody in here. You follow a woman named Lenore, and the setting is historical England in the height of the Industrial Revolution, and she's married to this businessman named named Henry, and their marriage is kind of devolving. There's a lot of misogyny and sexism that Lenore has to face, as she just has to kind of be the face of the household and do everything behind the scenes, while Henry gets to be this big businessman and make all these sort of risks and rash decisions, one of which buying a property. The whole point of buying this property is to have Lenore plan a big hunting party for all these big people in his business. But on their way there, they come across a turned over carriage with a woman named Carmilla, and they decide to take her to their home and let her recuperate there. Carmilla is weak and pale during the day, but thrives at night, and she begins to stir something deep inside Lenore. And before long, girls from the local village start to get sick with a terrible bloody hunger. And as the days of this hunt draw closer, Lenore begins to struggle with who she is and the role she's been playing. She's torn between trying to regain her husband's affection, but also the lustful hunger that Carmilla awakens within her. And yeah, this book is just all about hunger, and especially women's hunger and women's liberation when they are being oppressed, specifically by men. Story of self-discovery, betrayal, and finding your own individual power. It's very atmospheric and dark and gothic, so if you love gothic novels, you might love this. I think for me, the only reason why I didn't absolutely obsess over it is because I actually wanted more from the sapphic relationship. Carmilla is kind of this figure that helps Lenore figure out what she wants for herself and reclaim that power, but I honestly would have preferred like a little more romance, even like a little more smut maybe, I don't know. I was really just wanting to see their relationship evolve, whereas Carmilla's kind of just this figure to help Lenore explore herself, which I totally get can be the point of a book, but for me personally, I just was really craving more Carmilla and Lenore interaction. But that being said, the sapphic element of this is very slow burn. It feels like Carmilla really pulls this deep desire out of Lenore, which was very satisfying, and that's why I'm still recommending it on this list. Also, Kat Dunn is known for her sapphic novels, and she has a new one coming out called Rotten Heart, which so far I've heard is going to be amazing. So I think if you're into vampiric gothic novels, you might like this. Speaking of vampiric gothic novels, might I suggest A Diary of Blood by S.T. Gibson? I gave this 4.5 stars. S.T. Gibson's like a new autobi author for me. I absolutely adored this book. I was always told this is a Wife of Dracula retelling, but this is a Wife of Dracula retelling if Dracula and his wife Constance are in a toxic, obsessive, polyamorous relationship and they want to just bang each other all the time. And I loved it. We follow Dracula, who finds Constance on the verge of death and turns her, and they start a very toxic, possessive relationship. But obviously, as they are vampires, they live for so long that Dracula starts to have a wandering eye and bring in more people into their marriage. First, Constance is a little bit wary of this, but she slowly starts to accept these two other people, a woman and a man, into their marriage, and she becomes as obsessed with them as Dracula is. And as she begins to find comfort in her rival consorts, she also begins to unravel Dracula's dark secrets. She has to choose between her own freedom and the freedom of her fellow lovers and her husband. These bonds that were forged with blood can only be broken by death. And let me just say, this is another vengeful happily ever after that was just so satisfying. There's just nothing better when there is a bloody, brutal end and you're just like, hell yes, this is everything I wanted from this book. And it's interesting because the spice in this book is not super descriptive, but it is plentiful and it's very sensual and romantic, which is like a new different type of spice that I've never really read before. You're not getting these biological descriptions of what's happening, but you're getting the feelings, you're getting the emotions that are deriving from these actions. The sensuality and sexuality that's coming awake. And yeah, I was just absolutely obsessed. I will say there are darker themes in this, such as coercion and manipulation in a relationship, so do check your triggers, but overall, I felt like it wasn't overdone or brutal to a point where it was unreadable. And the relationships are complex and loving, but also toxic. And I don't know, there was just something about this book that was so captivating to me. And yeah, you like vampires, you like a little bit of dubious polyamory, some sensual erotica, pick this up. It's for you. Now I have one final book, and unfortunately, if you're in North America, this is getting published August 4th, so you can't read it yet, but this is one you need to add to your TBR immediately and pick it up the second it gets published, and that is Fruit Fly by Josh Silver. This is a Goldsboro UK edition because every now and then I order from that bookshop because it's my favorite. And I was able to get this edition, and it's a signed first edition, which I am so happy I did because this was a 5-star read for me, one of the best books I've read this year. This book is sort of promoted as a queer version of Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, but this is Yellowface if it was darker, grittier, and gayer, and it really commits and takes it there. You follow Mallory, who is a down-on-her-luck author, and she published a book like 7 years ago, but now she's in a writer's block. She's unhappy in her life, in her marriage, and on a drunken night, she decides to go on Reddit and look up what makes a bestseller. And she finds sort of a satirical post saying that what's popular with the publishing industry right now is gay and sad. And so because Mallory's like a little nutty up there, she decides to download Grindr to do like market research or something, and she ends up getting entangled in a young queer man's life whose name is Leo, and he's also homeless and an addict. Now, because Mallory has a therapy background, she approaches Leo with the guise of helping him through his addiction, but really she just wants to take his life story and his trauma and turn it into a new bestseller for herself. So really the only Yellowface-esque thing about this book is that someone has taken a marginalized person's story and passed it off as their own, but other than that, this novel, Fruit Fly, is completely unique and so different from Yellowface. Do check your triggers because like I said, this book is dark, okay? There is an SA scene. It's not graphic, but it's very emotional. It just felt like a gut punch to my chest. And it does affect one of our characters throughout the book, so just be mindful. However, I am sensitive to SA scenes, especially unnecessary SA scenes. But this one I felt was really done well and created that emotional impact without making me feel like gross or icked out. I also felt the addiction representation in this book was phenomenal. The way that it was portrayed really reminded me of that movie with Timothée Chalamet, Beautiful Boy. It was just so heartbreaking and real and raw and honest. I also felt the anxiety rep in this book was done phenomenally. As someone who used to sort of struggle with that in the past, I really felt connected to the character who was experiencing this, and it felt just so relatable. And lastly, there is an abusive marriage in this book that made my skin crawl. It was so visceral to me. Like I had to put the book down because it was getting too real, but I had to pick it back up because I was so addicted to the plot. Like that relationship literally left my nerves shot. It was ridiculous, and that's just a testament to Josh Silver's writing. Phenomenal. But a book can make me feel like I'm literally in the relationship, like I'm experiencing it. That is crazy well done writing. This book is for my unhinged girlies. This book is for the people who like commentary on the writing and publishing industry. Specifically, this book comments on what readers want and how publishers and agents decide what to publish or not. It mentions how gay and sad is popular right now, as well as themes of obsession, which made me feel a little called out because I do love obsession in my books. And I was like, damn, he's talking about me. This book is absolutely unhinged. It's feral, it's gay, it's sad, and it's so fucking good. If I could literally recommend any book out of this list, it's this one. It is in the running for the book of the year for me. Alrighty, and there you have it. That is my current list of some of my favorite queer authors and queer stories. Let me know down below if you've read any of these and what you thought, or if you have any recommendations for authors or books that you think I might like based on this list. I'm always looking to expand my TBR, obviously. And happy fucking Pride Month. All the safety and love to all the LGBTQIA+ viewers, brothers, sisters of mine. I love you. You are safe here. And let's all go out and celebrate Pride Month loud and proud this year. That is all for me today. Thank you for joining me on my channel, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.